So my claim to fame is that I met Sunny, I can't remember when, but I think it was either the late 90s or the early 2000s. And I have this vague memory of being in a house in Hout Bay in a library with lots of books. That's the man, and I remember, sure, this woman has so much experience. Anyway, to cut a long story short, while I was running my own business, my passion was always leadership and development, but I was mainly involved in training. And I came into corporate, and it wasn't going back to corporate, Steve. I'd never been in corporate. I'd had a lot of corporate clients. I'd run my own business with various corporate clients and so on. And I came in as the head of learning and development. And I soon took over OD as well in Metropolitan Health. And in our business, we then went into a merger. So our business is part of Momentum Metropolitan. Many people know it as MMI, but our two brands are Momentum Metropolitan. And we merged all our health businesses together. And through the merger, I'd taken on a bit of OD work, but I wasn't doing OD in the real way that OD should have been done because training was taking most of my time. And I want to invite Adela here, who became our divisional head of human capital and health. And she said to me, Debs, what do you want to do? Do you want to do L&D or do you want to do OD? And I said, I really want to do OD. The reason is I wanted to start doing work that had a real impact on leaders and that had a real impact on culture and that shifted organisational performance. And I wasn't able to do that through the work I was doing in L&D. So I then was given a challenge in our newly merged organization with one of our business units that was going through a very challenging time working with an external client. And the general manager at that time called us together and said he wants a people stream that will sort out engagement and culture and leadership. Can we put something together? And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what can we put together that's going to have impact? Now, fortunately, I brought Sunny in to work with our HR department a few years ago, and I knew that she was developing a lot of work on team coaching. And so a big challenge we had was the team we were working with. They weren't aligned. There were a whole lot of individual managers who happened to occasionally sit together in an exco. Does that make sense? I'm sure you've experienced that. And they were, I would say, pretty individualistic at times. We had quite a fear-based culture. We've been through a lot of change. People were really nervous about the change. And I would say we had some really good managers. They were excellent managers of processes. But very little was happening in leadership. And in L&D we'd sent people to business schools on MDPs and SMDPs, and we were not seeing any shifts. The individual gained, but the organization didn't gain. And so I called in Sunny, and I think we started working really as a team. What was so interesting was our model was one of an internal OD consultant and coach. Along the way, I also did the MPhil in management coaching at USB. So I met Sunny again as my lecturer at that time. And then later as a coach and supervisor working with me as we went through this program. But what was interesting was the first thing we had to do in the process was get the business buy-in. And it meant that we couldn't just work with Adela, our head of human capital. We needed to work with the general manager, we needed to work with the CEO, so that they could really understand what we were trying to do in the process. And I think the constant link between an external coach and business, I personally don't think it works unless you work very closely with a partner in business who speaks the same language as you. Because I was internal. I knew the people, I knew the politics, I knew the dynamics. And so we had to make sure that our process was dynamic. So for example, when I'd meet with Sunny, I would say to her, okay, we're in a difficult situation because we'd gone through retrenchments, we'd gone through, in fact, one of the people in that team ultimately was retrenched. So it was quite a traumatic time and others just carrying each other's trauma. So a lot of energy was not on leadership, it was on survival. And yet we had to align this team during a difficult change process. So we started the work, and I think many of the things in this book we actually did. And I think, Sunny was developing her models, we developed a design team alliance with the team, we took them away for the team inauguration, where we did a lot of assessments as well. We did the strengths deployment, we did various assessments. At the same time, we'd done cognitive profile assessments, CPPs, and the industrial psychologist fed back to Sunny and the other coaches. Now let me tell you where other coaches came in. When I started looking at how we're going to build this, I personally didn't think that team coaching on its own would achieve what we needed. We needed accelerated shifting in the individual leaders. So the model we put together was individual coaching and team coaching. Sunny coached our more executive senior people. I coached 4 or 5 people, they were actually people I didn't know well, to make sure there wasn't a conflict of interest. And then we brought in 2 other coaches. And so as a team of coaches, we met. Sunny would debrief what was happening in the team coaching. I was in every team coaching session. I would brief Sunny before. She'd say, okay, Debs, I'm thinking of using these tools. And I say, oh, well, this is happening. Okay, I'm changing my process. So it was a very dynamic kind of process. And we debrief afterwards. And then issues would be picked up in the team learning. So, for example, we dealt with the 4 toxins, we dealt with Lencioni's, and they were issues that started helping that team look at what they were doing. So the program ran over, I don't know if it was 12, 14 months or so, and the individual coaching also ran approximately that period. I was fortunate that I did my research assignment on it. And the main things we were trying to achieve, and that's what I was probing in the research, was we wanted personal transformation of self. Leaders had to grow in their self-awareness. We wanted leaders to be leaders of others, not to be super technical specialists that happened to have people reporting to them. So that was the big shift we were working on. We wanted leaders who would build an enabling environment that was safe, where people could thrive, where people could ask questions, where there weren't too many hierarchies and dynamics. And we wanted to build a high-performance organization. And lastly, we wanted to equip people with the skills for change. So between that's what we were trying to do in the process. And when I did the research, I think that, in the research I was mainly probing on the individual growth and what individuals were doing in their managerial practices and their leadership practices. But often people would talk about and in the team coaching and in the team coaching. Now, there were dynamics in the team. In any changing organization, there are organizational politics, there are cliques, etc., etc. But those teams were forced to address them and start having honest conversations, which they'd never done before. What I found was that because we started putting in place that action reflective learning methodology, the whole concept of being a learning organization. And what was interesting was that as people went into the research and debriefed around the impact of the coaching, and I don't know if we often do that, it was many of the people said, I have learned so much about myself just in this interview. And I'm going to quote just the one quote which really stood out for me. And it was a man that said this. I've needed to reflect quite deeply about how I behaved in the past. I needed to reflect, critically self-reflect and say, what am I doing for people to not really be comfortable to talk to me about difficult issues? Am I too impatient? Am I too critical? I didn't even realize what I was doing to other people. I probably didn't even know. But the biggest insight is my execution and how I make people feel. I didn't know I was having such an impact. I had a seriously negative impact on people. Don't do that, man. Why? and those are some of the reflections I got in the research, where people were making little steps, little bits of self-awareness, little bits of moving together. And the team was aligning. What was interesting, and I think this is probably the most important thing, I don't believe that coaches can build good leadership practice. I believe other leaders build good leadership practice. We then got a very, very good dynamic business leader that came in, and he was very committed to building an enabling culture. And I do believe we laid the foundation with that team, Sunny, to get the business to a point where it needed to move forward, to allow people to be more free to speak. They'd never sat in a circle and spoken. We used all Nancy Klein's techniques of doing a round, going into pairs. We had council sessions. We put a business problem in the middle, put them in a council session, and they looked at each other. They said, we solved this problem in 7 minutes. Our meetings are usually long and boring, and we never solve anything. So they learned a lot of techniques and skills. The role of the coach is to just reinforce them all the time and to keep questioning. So what was quite interesting about this new leader coming in is that he came in and he then started demanding alignment of his team. He started talking the language of, if you're not going to lead, you don't belong here, we'll make you a specialist. That's okay, you're still valuable, you're still part of the business, but if you're going to lead people, that's a responsibility and an accountability. And I think those conversations begin in the team coaching. They happen more deeply in the individual coaching. So I'm going to end off with, well, what have I learned? What has our organization learned through this team coaching initiative and what I learned through working very closely with Sunny? I think I realized, particularly as a practitioner, that just running hit-and-run training was not going to have any impact. Dave Ulrich always says you have impact when you shift culture, you contribute to leadership, and you develop talent. Coaching does all three of those. So how do we make sure that when we are training in leadership and management practices, we build a coaching element so that the learning happens? And that's a practice we've now built into our programs. We started 2 new programs together with the business school programs, which we still run because they have a place. One for team leaders, where we take them through various modules, but then the team coaching between those modules is where team leaders come back and reflect on their context and how they applied what they learned. A very important process, peer learning from each other. And then with our senior managers, we've just piloted a program called Leading for Impact and High Performance. And it's really very much based on a coaching model. We use Nancy Klein, we get people to look at their leadership signature present, we get people to, leaders to become coaches. And so I think we're building a culture of coaching and a culture of learning in our organization. I don't believe we can expect a leader to be a coach if they haven't been coached. We can't expect them to align their teams and move them forward if they haven't been part of that process. They need to experience it. So very much we work both from the top with our senior leaders and from the bottom. So I want to thank Sunny and my team, Adela, that I work with. I learn so much from people all the time. But I do believe individual coaching and particularly team coaching is what is needed to shift organizations to performance. Thank you.